Welcome to part 2 of the tutorial series, How to Play the Savage Soul. This tutorial will discuss the order of a combat round in the Savage Soul. And this is one of the things that makes the Savage Soul so different from other systems out there. Rather than relying upon the randomness of initiative, Savage Soul combat rounds are based upon leadership and tactical thinking. This keeps all the players more engaged in the battle, rather than simply waiting for their turn to act. Each combat round in the Savage Soul follows a specific series of steps. The first step requires each force to designate a character as its leader for the combat round. The second step involves the designated leaders performing a competing leadership task to establish dominance and motivation. The third step is for the dominant leader to assign any motivation tokens he may have earned in Step 2. The fourth step is to assign ready tokens to all the characters that have not been assigned motivation tokens. The fifth step is for the dominant leader to designate the first character to activate. Activations then alternate back and forth between the two forces, with the designated leader of each force nominating one of his ready characters to activate. The final step is the end of the combat round, where certain special effects may take place, and where characters will sometimes be required to make willpower attempts to resist becoming winded. Perhaps the best way to illustrate the order of events in a Savage Soul combat round is simply to walk through 3 rounds of combat, step by step. In this example, the legendary Princess Kepri and her 2 companions, the mysterious swordsman named Zakir and the tiny young sorcerer named Larson, are making their way across the desert when they come face to face with a hostile group of thuggers led by a burly-looking thugger boss. In the first step of Combat Round 1, each force must designate a leader. The heroes unanimously agree that Princess Kepri will be their designated leader, and the GM decides that the Thugger Boss will be the designated leader of the Thuggers. In Step 2, the designated leaders make a competing task leadership attempt. The leader with the highest total will earn dominance for the combat round, and that leader's success margin may also grant a number of motivation tokens. In this case, Princess Kepri is unfortunate and rolls a 2 on her D10 for an attempt total of 12. The Thugger Boss is more fortunate and rolls a 6 on his D10, which also results in an attempt total of 12, a tie. In this situation, neither side can be considered the defender for purposes of this competing task. As a result, the tie must be broken by a D10 roll-off, applying no attributes or other modifiers. On the roll-off, Princess Kepri rolls a 9, and the Thugger Boss rolls a 7. This means Princess Kepri wins the competing task with a success margin of 0. Because her success margin is less than 2, however, Princess Kepri does not earn any motivation tokens. Because Princess Kepri has no motivation tokens, we can skip the step where she would assign motivation tokens. Instead, a ready token should be assigned to each character involved in the battle. In the 5th step, because Princess Kepri won dominance in the leadership competition, she may choose whether to designate a member of her force to activate first, or defer to the opposing leader to designate one of his characters to activate. Seeing that she and her companions are outnumbered, Princess Kepri designates herself to activate first, and attempts a risky move by performing a spell without concentrating. Fortunately for her, she successfully conjures 2 skeleton warriors from the desert sand, positioning them in such a way that it will be difficult for the Thuggers to move past them without engaging. It is important to note that because the conjured skeletons entered the battle after ready tokens had been assigned, they are not assigned any ready tokens for this combat round. They can still defend themselves and perform certain reactions, but they do not have any ready tokens at their disposal. This spell attempt cost Princess Khepri her ready token, and because her force has no motivation tokens, she has no choice but to defer to the designated leader of the opposing force. The Thugger boss designates one of his Thuggers to activate. The Thugger discards his ready token and performs a charge and strike action against one of the nearby skeleton warriors. But the skeleton warrior blocks the attack. Control now alternates back to Princess Khepri, who designates Zakir to activate. Seeing that a Thugger has charged to within his own charge range, Zakir discards his ready token and also performs a charge and strike action, swinging his sword at the Thugger, who barely blocks the attack with his knife. The Thugger boss then designates another Thugger to activate. That Thugger discards his ready token and performs a charge and strike action against the other skeleton, but the skeleton blocks the clumsy attack. Princess Khepri now has no choice but to designate Larson to activate, and Larson discards his ready token to perform a concentrate action and gain the concentration condition. This renders Larson defenseless, but will make it easier for him to perform spells on subsequent activations, so long as the concentration condition remains in effect. Since Princess Khepri's force has no ready tokens remaining, the Thugger boss will be able to continue activating members of his force until all ready tokens have been expended. The Thugger boss designates this Thugger to activate. Recognizing the danger of a concentrating sorcerer, the active Thugger discards his ready token, moves forward half his run meters, and performs an aim action against Larson. This renders the Thugger defenseless, but will greatly increase his chance to hit Larson with his pistol on subsequent activations. The Thugger boss then designates his other Thugger to activate, and that Thugger does something very similar, moving slightly forward and performing an aim action against Princess Khepri. Finally, the Thugger boss designates himself to act and discards his ready token to perform a charge and strike action against one of the skeleton warriors. But once again, the skeleton is able to block the attack. This ends combat round 1, and since there are no conditions in play that would have end-of-round effects, the battle proceeds to combat round 2. Each force chooses to keep the same designated leaders. Princess Khepri then rolls a 6 for a leadership attempt total of 16, and the Thugger boss rolls an 8 for a leadership attempt total of 14. Thus, Princess Khepri again wins dominance, but since her success margin is 2, she also earns 2 motivation tokens. She assigns 1 motivation token to Zakir, so that he will be able to strike before having to focus on defending himself. And she assigns her second motivation token to Larson, so that Larson can cast a spell before being forced to abort his concentration condition. Then, as always, each character that was not assigned a motivation token is assigned a ready token. As the dominant leader, Princess Khepri may again choose which force will activate first. In this case, consistent with her strategy for assigning the motivation tokens, Princess Khepri chooses to have her force activate first. She then designates Larson to activate. Still subject to the concentration condition, Larson discards his motivation token and declares a task attempt action, hoping to perform a soften spell against the Thugger boss. The spell is successful, and the Thugger boss's damage resistance is significantly reduced by the hostile magic. Khepri then designates Zakir to activate, and Zakir discards his motivation token to perform a strike action against the nearby Thugger. Unfortunately, Zakir misses. You will note that, because Khepri's force had 2 motivation tokens, she did not have to defer to the Thugger boss after designating Larson to activate. Rather, she was immediately able to designate Zakir to activate because, like Larson, Zakir also had a motivation token. Thus, motivation tokens may allow several members of a force to activate before deferring to the opposing force. The Thugger boss designates the Thugger that is aiming at Larson to activate. That Thugger discards his ready token and declares a shoot action against Larson. In response to this declaration, Larson performs the abort reaction, which does not require a ready token, and aborts his concentration condition. This will afford Larson a better chance of avoiding the Thugger's shot. Unfortunately for Larson, the Thugger's shot is accurate, and despite Larson's effort to dodge, the bullet hits Larson for a minor wound. This increases Larson's injury condition to barely injured, and requires Larson to attempt to resist stun, which Larson fails. Larson gains the stunned condition and becomes defenseless. Larson's stun also cancels his soften spell on the Thugger boss, and the spell's maintenance mana is discarded. Khepri then designates this skeleton to activate, ordering it to attack the nearby Thugger. The skeleton discards its ready token and performs a strike action. In response, the Thugger discards his ready token to perform an active defense reaction. But his attempt to block is unsuccessful, and the skeleton slashes the Thugger for a serious wound, increasing the Thugger's injury condition to seriously injured. The Thugger also fails his attempt to resist stun, and gains the stun condition in addition to being knocked down. The Thugger boss then designates this Thugger to activate, and the Thugger discards his ready token to perform a strike action against the skeleton. This forces the skeleton to discard its ready token to perform an active defense reaction, and the skeleton successfully blocks the Thugger's blade. Realizing she is in serious danger of being shot by the aiming Thugger, Princess Khepri begins to move to a more advantageous position. Realizing what Khepri is doing, however, the Thugger discards his ready token to perform an attack a moving character reaction against Princess Khepri before she moves behind cover. But despite his aim, the Thugger misses. Princess Khepri then completes her move and performs a concentrate action to gain the concentration condition. Realizing one of his Thuggers is in trouble, the Thugger boss designates himself to activate, then discards his ready token to perform a double time action. With one of his two moves, he moves to his fallen follower, and with his second move, he displaces the fallen Thugger out of harm's way and takes his place against Zakir and the skeleton warrior. With no ready tokens remaining, and no conditions in play that would have end-of-round effects, Round 2 comes to an end, and we move into Combat Round 3. Both forces again choose to maintain their designated leaders, and the leaders perform a new leadership competition. Princess Khepri rolls a 5 for a leadership attempt total of 15, and the Thugger boss also rolls a 5 for a leadership total of 11. Princess Khepri again wins dominance, and this time, her success margin is 4, earning her 4 motivation tokens. Knowing she must use her motivation tokens tactically to gain the maximum possible advantage, Khepri assigns 1 motivation token to Larson to allow him to recover from stun before he is attacked. She then assigns motivation tokens to each of her skeleton warriors, and assigns the last motivation token to herself. All other characters in the battle, including Zakir and the stunned Thugger, are then assigned ready tokens. Seizing the opportunity to go first, Princess Khepri designates Larson to activate. Larson has no choice but to discard his motivation token and perform a recover from stun action, which eliminates his stunned condition. Khepri then designates herself to activate, and, taking advantage of her concentration condition, she performs a task attempt action to cast a power level 5 harm spell against the Thugger that is aiming at her. The spell is successful, and Princess Kepri's powerful divine magic causes the Thugger to die instantly. Kepri then designates a skeleton warrior to activate and orders it to strike the Thugger boss. The skeleton discards its motivation token and strikes a devastating blow at the Thugger boss, who has little choice but to discard his ready token to attempt active defense. But despite the boss's attempt to block, the skeleton slashes him, increasing his injury condition to barely injured, and requiring an attempt to resist stun, which the Thugger boss fails. Kepri then designates her other skeleton to activate and orders him to strike the nearby Thugger. The skeleton discards its motivation token and strikes accurately at the Thugger, forcing the Thugger to discard his ready token for an active defense reaction, which he uses successfully to block the attack. Because the designated leader of the Thugger force is now incapacitated, Princess Kepri may direct the order of the enemy's activations for the remainder of the combat round. And, wishing to keep the fallen Thugger stunned for as long as possible, Kepri designates the aiming Thugger to activate. That Thugger discards his ready token to perform a shoot action against Larson. But since Larson is no longer stunned, Larson is able to use active defense to successfully dodge the shot. Princess Kepri then designates Zakir to activate, and Zakir discards his ready token to perform a strike against the stunned and defenseless Thugger boss. Zakir chops his sword into the enemy's head, killing him instantly. Because the Thugger boss is still incapacitated, Princess Kepri remains in control of the enemy activations. Because there is only one ready token remaining, however, she has no choice but to designate the stunned Thugger to activate, and he recovers from stun. And because there are no ready tokens left, we come to the end of Combat Round 3. And because there are no conditions in play that would have end-of-round effects, we would move on to Combat Round 4. If this battle were to continue to the end of Combat Round 12, everyone involved would have to make a willpower attempt to resist becoming winded. In this case, being winded would have a significant effect upon Princess Kepri, as it would dispel her 2 conjured skeletons and cause her to discard all of the supporting maintenance mana. In future tutorials, attacks, active defense, damage, stun, and spellcasting will be explained in detail. The purpose of this tutorial was simply to show the flow of a combat round in the Savage Soul and how activations are directed by the designated leaders of each force. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please stay tuned for the next tutorial. And if you're enjoying these tutorials or finding them helpful, please like the video and leave a comment below. Please also consider subscribing so you will receive a notification whenever a new tutorial is posted. Thank you.